Prince William had entered the palace council chamber, prepared for another controlled discussion about royal duties. He did not expect his mother's brother to rise, turn directly toward Queen Camilla, and speak the words the palace had spent decades trying to bury. Before the meeting ended, William's composure collapsed. Camilla was left frozen before the council, and the monarchy's most carefully protected wound was torn open in full public view. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure you subscribe to Royal Zone so you don't miss a single update. King Charles had summoned the gathering at Buckingham Palace because the crown faced a decision it could no longer postpone. The Palace Council, a private group of senior royals and advisors assembled to settle sensitive matters, was meeting to decide how Diana's legacy would shape a charitable memorial tied to her eldest son. Charles sat at the head of the table, Camilla beside him, William opposite them, and Charles Spencer nearby. Diana's brother had been invited to approve family letters, childhood memories, and private reflections. His presence was meant to unite the Spencers and the crown. Instead, he rose, placed both hands on the table, and changed everything. Spencer turned toward the Queen and accused her of allowing Diana's memory to be softened, controlled, and pushed aside to protect her own position. He demanded that the council recognize the late princess, not as a distant chapter, but as the mother whose influence still lived through William and the monarchy he would one day lead. The prince gripped the table. He tried to remain still, yet his breathing changed when his uncle said Diana's love had been treated like an inconvenience, requiring careful management. Camilla did not move. Every face turned toward her. She said she had never tried to erase Diana. Spencer answered that no one needed to remove a name to erase a presence. Silence, edited speeches, and institutional control could do the same work. Then he placed a sealed folder before the king. Inside, he said, were correspondence and palace memoranda, internal records guiding royal decisions, showing efforts to separate William's public duty from his mother's emotional legacy. William looked at the folder, then at his father. Something inside him gave way. He pushed back his chair, covered his face for one brief moment, and left without asking permission. Catherine rose and followed him. Charles stared at the unopened evidence, while Camilla remained beneath the council's silent judgment. But William's collapse could not be understood through one confrontation alone, because every person inside that chamber had entered carrying a different version of Diana, and each version threatened someone else's place in the monarchy. The confrontation appeared to be between Diana's brother and the woman who eventually became queen. But the deepest conflict belonged to William. He was not simply watching two figures from his parents' past collide. He was standing between the family that raised his mother, the father who inherited the crown, and the institution that had taught him to hide grief behind duty. Every side wanted loyalty. None understood what that loyalty was costing him. William had lived with that division since childhood. As Diana's son, he carried memories no ceremony could contain. As the future king, he had been trained to place the monarchy before his own pain. The crown, meaning the institution of royal authority and duty, passed from one sovereign to the next, demanded discipline, even when grief remained completely raw. He loved his mother fiercely, yet he also loved Charles. Every time Diana's name became a palace debate, the prince felt as though honoring one parent might wound the other. Charles Spencer carried a very different burden. Diana's brother had spent years believing he had failed to protect her when she was alive, and that guilt had hardened into a promise after her death. He saw William growing into duty while swallowing emotions that should never have been treated as weakness. To Spencer, defending his sister's memory was no longer about history. It was about protecting her son from carrying that history alone. Charles had sensed the danger before the council even began. In a private exchange outside the chamber, the king told William the meeting required calm, not another reopening of the past. His son looked directly at him and answered, "The past never closed for me." The monarch heard the warning, but he still believed dignity could control whatever followed. He did not yet understand that William had reached the edge of silence. Camilla felt it too. Sitting alone before entering, she adjusted a bracelet again and again while trying to steady her hand. The Queen feared Spencer's anger, but she feared William's honesty even more. If the prince finally said what he had hidden for years, Charles might be forced to choose between the woman beside him and the son standing before him. Catherine watched her husband reread the council papers without absorbing a single word. She quietly asked whether he wanted the discussion postponed. William shook his head. "Delay," he said, "would only give others more time to decide how Diana should be remembered." Spencer approached him moments later and made one private promise. He would not attack William or the king, but he would not let Diana become a polished footnote. The prince offered no approval. Yet he did not ask his uncle to remain silent, because Spencer's fury had begun weeks earlier, when one palace ceremony removed Diana's name at the very last moment. That missing name became the spark, because weeks before the council erupted, one carefully edited ceremony convinced Diana's brother that the palace was not preserving history. It was rewriting it. The road to the palace council confrontation began at a ceremony designed to celebrate compassion. William was meant to dedicate a new royal center for vulnerable young people, a project inspired partly by the emotional openness Diana had shown during his childhood. Her name appeared throughout the original program. Then, hours before the event, every direct reference disappeared. One instruction had changed the ceremony, and Charles Spencer never forgot who had approved it. William had supported the Diana Center for Young Families because it connected his mother's instinctive compassion with the work he wanted to carry forward. The center was meant to support parents and children facing trauma, isolation, and instability. Its early program described Diana as the emotional inspiration behind the project, while Spencer had been invited to deliver a family reflection about the values she passed to her sons. The program, meaning the official printed order and wording for a royal event, was supposed to make that connection completely clear. Senior advisors grew uneasy as the ceremony approached. They feared that placing Diana's name too strongly beside William would revive public comparisons between the late princess and Camilla. Instead of honoring a mother's influence, they warned the event might become another public judgment on the Queen. Their solution was simple but dangerous. Reduce the personal language and present the center as a general royal initiative. William discovered the change during a rehearsal at Kensington Palace. An aide handed him a revised program sent from Camilla's office. The words, "Inspired by Diana, Princess of Wales," had been replaced with "An initiative of the Prince and Princess of Wales." Spencer's tribute had disappeared completely. The prince stared at the page, then asked who had approved it. When told the Queen's household had requested greater institutional balance, he folded the paper once and placed it down. Catherine watched her husband continue the rehearsal as though nothing had happened. He answered questions, confirmed timings, and moved through every duty expected of him. Yet she saw the distance settle across him. William spoke less, avoided the original program, and refused to discuss the change until they were completely alone. Spencer learned the truth after arriving for the ceremony. He stopped the event secretary beside a closed corridor door and demanded to know why his sister's name had vanished from a project shaped by her example. The official offered procedural explanations about balance, unity, and palace approval. None answered the real question. Spencer later received a copied revision sheet through a documented exchange with a member of the planning team. Beside the disputed wording were Camilla's handwritten words: "Avoid excessive personal attribution." Whether she intended caution or control no longer mattered to him. He folded the page into his jacket and requested a private audience with Charles. When the king refused, Diana's brother demanded a seat before the palace council, with William present. Spencer had remained silent while the cameras watched, but inside the council chamber, there would be no edited program, no rehearsed smiles, and no corridor through which Camilla could quietly escape. When Charles Spencer rose from his chair, no one interrupted him. The room understood that protocol had already failed. He placed the altered ceremony program beside Camilla's papers, pointed to the missing tribute, and asked whether Diana's name had become so dangerous that even her own son had to be protected from it. Camilla looked toward Charles. The king did not speak. Then Spencer delivered the accusation that shattered William's control. Charles ordered every word spoken inside the chamber to remain completely confidential. The palace council, a private gathering used to settle sensitive royal matters, had no cameras, no recording devices, and no audience beyond those seated at the long table. Yet the monarch's authority weakened the moment Spencer pushed the revised program into the center. That single page carried more weight than any official statement, because it showed exactly where Diana's name had been removed. Spencer began without shouting. He acknowledged that Camilla had endured years of public judgment and had fought to establish her place beside the king. But acceptance, he said, did not give her the right to reduce Diana's role in William's life. The future king was not simply carrying a royal title. He was carrying the memory of a mother whose influence had shaped the very compassion the monarchy now celebrated. Camilla stood. She told Diana's brother that he was accusing her of cruelty, without understanding the pressure of protecting the crown. The queen argued that every reference to the past could reopen old wounds and turn a charitable event into another public trial. Spencer stepped closer to the table and answered that Diana had heard the same defense whenever her feelings became inconvenient. Protection, he said, had too often meant silence. William remained completely still until his uncle turned toward him. Spencer apologized for forcing him to hear the confrontation, then said Diana would have been devastated to see her son needing permission to honor her. The prince lowered his head. He pressed both hands against his eyes, but the grief broke through. Before the council, before his father, and before the woman at the center of the dispute, he began to cry. Camilla finally admitted that she had approved the revised program. She explained that her intention was to stop the ceremony from becoming another public comparison between herself and the late princess. Charles looked at her in disbelief. The king had believed communications officials had made the change. Now he understood that the instruction had come directly from her office. William lifted his head and spoke through the emotion. Avoiding comparison, he told Camilla, was not the same as creating peace. Every attempt to make Diana smaller forced him to relive the feeling that his mother had become a problem the family wanted managed. Charles struck the table once and suspended the meeting. But before leaving, the prince told his father the matter could not be buried again. He demanded a formal decision over who controlled Diana's legacy inside the royal household. William's tears had changed the balance of the room, but emotion alone could not determine the outcome. The next battle would be fought through authority, inheritance, and the king's power to decide whose memory the crown was willing to protect. After the chamber emptied, Charles remained alone with the altered program, Spencer's sealed folder, and the sound of his son's chair scraping across the floor. For decades, he had survived by separating private emotion from royal responsibility. Now that separation had completely collapsed. Defending Camilla risked breaking William. Supporting William risked exposing his wife. And refusing to choose would reveal that the king no longer controlled the family gathered beneath his crown. Charles still held the formal power. As sovereign, he controlled council procedure, senior household appointments, commemorative policy, and the official language attached to royal projects. A sovereign is the reigning monarch with final authority over the crown's internal decisions, which meant no lasting settlement over Diana's legacy could exist without his approval. Yet power had become divided around him. Camilla's household influenced ceremonial wording. William's office controlled his charitable work, and Spencer held something no title could grant: the moral authority of Diana's family, and the freedom to challenge the palace in public. Charles opened the sealed folder after the final aide left. Inside were edited speeches, delayed approvals, shortened tributes, and internal notes reducing Diana's presence in events linked to her sons. He read one document, then another. The king removed his glasses, placed them beside the papers, and sat completely motionless when he realized the pattern reached far beyond one ceremony. This was not a single mistake. It was a system of caution that had slowly become control. Keolai returned before he could close the file. She told her husband that she had acted to prevent endless comparison, another round of headlines, and another public judgment of their marriage. Charles answered that she had not protected him by making decisions behind his back. The Queen's composure cracked. She asked whether decades of loyalty meant nothing now that William had cried before witnesses. The monarch did not answer quickly, and that silence frightened her more than anger ever could. Catherine entered later without her husband. She told Charles that Spencer's words had not created William's collapse. They had released years of buried pain. The princess explained that he had long believed defending Diana would look like disloyalty to his father. Charles finally understood the truth. His son's silence had never meant healing. It had meant restraint. Charles drafted a formal resolution transferring authority over Diana-related charitable commemorations to William, with the Spencer family consulted on private material. A resolution is an official written decision defining what the royal household must follow. The measure would stop Camilla's office from altering future tributes and reduce her influence over the monarchy's most painful memory. An aide delivered the draft to Camilla's private sitting room. She read the final clause twice, removed her royal brooch, and ordered the door closed. The resolution had not yet been signed, but Camilla understood its meaning immediately. The confrontation was no longer about one deleted name. It was beginning to redraw the boundaries of her power. By nightfall, the council chamber was empty, but the palace had split into invisible camps. William withdrew with Catherine. Camilla cancelled her evening engagement. Charles ordered every document connected to Diana's commemorations reviewed. Aides who had spent years avoiding the subject suddenly searched old files for their own signatures. No public announcement had been made. Yet inside the royal household, everyone understood that the Queen's authority had been challenged, and the Prince of Wales had stopped pretending he was unaffected. Charles moved quickly, because delay now carried its own danger. He ordered the communications offices of the King, Queen, and Prince of Wales to surrender every email, draft, speech, memorial plan, and charitable note connected to Diana. The communications offices were the palace teams responsible for shaping official messages and public wording, and their records could reveal who had changed what. Staff were warned not to destroy documents, contact journalists, or alter earlier files. The monarch wanted the full truth before the story escaped the palace. Charles also postponed the final council decision until the following morning. Until then, Camilla's office was temporarily forbidden from changing any language connected to William's tributes. That restriction gave the future king practical control before the resolution had even been signed. It also sent a brutal message. The king no longer trusted his wife's household to act without supervision. Camilla dismissed her dresser and remained alone beside the unsigned document. She pushed the altered ceremony program into a drawer, closed it, then pulled it out again moments later. Anger came first. Fear followed. The Queen could defend a cautious decision, but she could not easily defend acting without Charles's knowledge. For the first time, she understood that he might see her choice not as protection, but as betrayal. William sat with Catherine at Kensington Palace, still holding the council papers. He told her he felt ashamed for losing control in front of everyone. She took the pages from his hands and said the shame belonged to those who had made grief feel unacceptable. The prince admitted that defeating Camilla was never what he wanted. He was more frightened that speaking honestly might cost him his father. Charles then received a private call from a senior courtier. In that documented conversation, the official confirmed that Camilla's office had repeatedly requested softer language around Diana. Staff had obeyed because they believed those wishes reflected the king's private instructions. The revelation made the pattern impossible to dismiss. Spencer, meanwhile, packed his papers at a London residence, convinced he had wounded William while trying to defend him. Then a handwritten note arrived. It contained one sentence: "You said what I could not." Diana's brother unpacked the folder and decided to remain. Shortly before midnight, Charles sent an equerry, an official royal aide who delivers personal instructions, to summon William alone. No advisors, no Camilla, no Catherine, no record. For the first time since the confrontation, father and son would meet without a council table between them. And what William said in that room would determine whether the monarchy fractured, or finally faced its grief. Charles met William before sunrise in a private room overlooking the palace gardens. There were no red boxes, no equerries, and no prepared statements. The king had removed his jacket. William carried nothing. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then Charles asked the question he had avoided for years. Had his son believed that loving Diana openly would be interpreted as a rejection of him? William's answer changed the conflict from a royal crisis into a reckoning between father and son. Charles had chosen a room far from formal business because he knew ceremony would only protect them from the truth. Red boxes are the official cases used to carry government and royal papers, and none had been allowed inside. He poured the tea himself, but William left his cup untouched. Without staff, advisors, or written notes, the usual distance between monarch and heir disappeared. They were no longer speaking as king and future king. They were speaking as father and son. William told him the pain had never come from loving one parent more than the other. He had never wanted Charles humiliated, and he did not want Camilla punished. What he wanted was simple: the freedom to speak about Diana without feeling the entire family tighten around her name. Every edited tribute, every softened reference, and every removed memory felt like another demand to abandon his mother in exchange for peace. Charles listened without interruption. He admitted that his determination to protect Camilla had created a dangerous silence. By shielding his wife from comparison, the king had allowed others to believe Diana's memory needed to be controlled. He had mistaken William's discipline for recovery, when it had really been survival. Then he apologized for allowing his son to carry grief as though it were a constitutional obligation, a duty imposed by the very structure of the monarchy itself. William did not answer with anger. He told his father that stripping Camilla of dignity would repeat the cruelty that had damaged Diana. The prince wanted no exile, no public humiliation, and no revenge. He asked for one permanent boundary. The queen could keep her place beside the king, but she could never again control how Diana's sons honored their mother. Charles took out the proposed resolution. He crossed through language that sounded punitive and wrote a clearer clause granting William sole authority over official projects bearing Diana's name. A resolution is a formal written decision that sets rules the royal household must follow. He also added that the Spencer family must be consulted whenever private letters, personal archives, or family material were used. Charles then asked whether William could return to the council chamber. His son agreed, but only if Spencer could speak and Camilla could answer without being destroyed. The king accepted those terms and summoned the council again. William had chosen protection over revenge. But the true test would come when he faced Camilla again. because forgiveness could not begin until the woman at the center of the dispute acknowledged what her decision had truly cost him. Before the second council meeting ended, fragments of the confrontation escaped the palace. By midday, Britain knew that Diana's brother had challenged Camilla, and that William had broken down before senior royals. The secrecy surrounding the chamber only intensified the public reaction. Crowds returned to the gates, where Diana's death had once united strangers in grief. Broadcasters asked whether the monarchy had finally confronted the emotional debt it owed her eldest son. A council staff member had revealed enough of the private exchange for the story to dominate every major broadcast. The palace confirmed that a deeply personal family discussion had taken place. Yet, it refused to deny Spencer's challenge or William's emotional reaction. That careful statement only deepened public suspicion. A palace council is a private royal meeting used to settle sensitive family and institutional matters. So even partial details escaping from it suggested that the conflict had shaken people far beyond the room itself. Commentators split almost immediately. Some described Spencer as a protective brother who had finally forced accountability after years of silence. Others accused him of reopening William's grief in front of the very institution that had taught him to suppress it. Camilla's supporters argued that the Queen was being punished for surviving a past she had not created alone. The debate became less about one altered program and more about who had the right to control Diana's memory. Catherine placed the morning newspapers on a table, but turned the harshest front page face down. William noticed. He reached across, turned it over, and read the headline. Diana's brother faces the Queen, William in tears. The image beside it showed him leaving Buckingham Palace with his jaw tightly clenched. The prince said nothing, but he kept staring until his wife quietly removed the paper from his hands. Camilla heard the reaction from inside the palace. Beyond the gates, voices began chanting Diana's name. She stepped back from the window and told an aide she would not appear publicly until the council reached its decision. For the first time, the Queen understood that her attempt to reduce one tribute had awakened something far larger than palace rivalry. A young mother then placed white roses beneath Diana's statue at Kensington Palace. Attached was a handwritten card. A son should never need permission to remember his mother. Broadcasters repeated the image throughout the day, and the simple message became the clearest symbol of public feeling. Spencer later addressed the press outside his London residence in a brief recorded statement. "This was never about removing anyone," he said. "It was about refusing to remove Diana." His words weakened claims that he wanted Camilla destroyed and increased pressure for a balanced settlement. Hours later, the palace announced that Charles, William, Camilla, and Spencer had reached a unanimous agreement. The details would not come through a written statement. William would deliver them himself. The public had already chosen the image it would remember, a white rose beneath Diana's statue. But inside the palace, William was preparing to reveal whether grief had produced another royal division or a final act of truth. William returned to the same council chamber where his composure had collapsed, but he did not return broken. Charles stood beside him. Spencer remained near the door. Camilla faced him from across the table, no longer protected by carefully edited language or inherited silence. The decision before them would not reverse the past, restore Diana, or erase decades of pain, but it would determine whether the monarchy continued fearing her memory or finally accepted that her legacy belonged within its future. Charles placed the Diana Legacy Charter before the council and signed it without hesitation. The charter, a formal royal document setting permanent household rules, gave William full authority over charitable projects, memorial language, and official commemorations connected directly to his mother. It also granted the Spencer family a defined consultative role over Diana's private letters, family history, and personal archives. The king understood why that mattered. Her story would no longer be shaped only by palace caution, and her son would no longer need permission to honor her. Camilla's position remained completely intact. The document did not remove her title, dignity, or ceremonial standing. Instead, it drew a firm boundary around her influence. Her household could no longer alter, reduce, or suppress references to Diana in projects led by William or Harry. The Queen would not be discarded to protect the late princess, but the late princess would no longer be diminished to protect the Queen. Camilla turned toward William and spoke without any defense. She admitted that she had approved the program change because she feared another wave of comparison, hostility, and public judgment. That fear, she said, had led her to interfere with something deeply personal to him. She apologized, then slid the original program across the table. William looked at her for a long moment. He said he could not forget how the decision had made him feel, but he would not allow Diana's name to become a weapon used to humiliate Camilla. He asked only that no one in the family ever again confused silence with healing. The Queen nodded and accepted the boundary. Spencer then admitted that his confrontation had wounded William even while trying to defend him. Charles acknowledged that palace discomfort had shaped policy for far too long. The two men shook hands, not as friends, and not in complete forgiveness, but in agreement that the prince should never again stand alone between their histories. William took the revised ceremony program, crossed through the replacement title, and wrote back the original words, "Inspired by Diana, Princess of Wales." He set down the pen. Charles signed beneath it. William's breakdown had not been weakness. It was the moment inherited silence became impossible to maintain. Honoring Camilla no longer required diminishing Diana, and loving his father no longer required hiding his mother. The council ended without exile or victory, but with a truth strong enough to protect the living and honor the dead. And when William left the chamber beside his father, carrying the restored program rather than hiding his tears, the monarchy's verdict was complete. Diana would not be erased, Camilla would not be destroyed, and silence would never again be mistaken for peace. Thanks for watching Royal Zone. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Royal Zone so you never miss an update. And we will see you in the next one.